full enough, so we're gonna get started. Thank you everyone for being here. So I'm Tavri Crouch. I am with the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. I'm also indie little filmmaker on the side. Because we love films, this is why we're here. I'm really thrilled to be here with these esteemed panelists for the Art and Commerce of Asian American Cinema, presented by Asians in Media, New York Women in Film and Television, and of course, the New York Asian Film Festival. All right, so if anyone knows anything about independent filmmaking, we know it's not for the faint of heart. Let's be honest. It's a challenging industry, especially when you're trying to tell bold, honest stories on independent budgets. So tonight's conversation is all about pulling back that curtain on what it really looks like. The creative decisions, the hustle, the business hustle, everything in between. So we're going to talk about what it means to not just break in, but what it means to stick around. What it means to build a career that's sustainable, creatively fulfilling, and true to your voice, even when the market tries to push you in different directions. So we're all lucky to be joined again by these three incredible producers, producer-writers, starting with Po. So Po Si Teng. Po is an award-winning director and producer behind St. Louis Superman and the recent Hulu Disney doc, Patrice, the movie. Her career spans ABC Disney, Al Jazeera, and the New York Times. She is founder of Tiny Boxer Films and currently leads multiple global documentary projects focused on politics, disability, and identity. Next, we have Veronica. Veronica, I have my cards mixed up. Veronica Reyes-Howe. Veronica is a writer, producer, and former actor whose career spans from touring with Rent to creating her own comedy/drama, Mother May I Have a Kidney, which premiered at the 2025 Tribeca Festival. Allie and I saw it and it is hilarious, so definitely check it out if you get a chance. She is a 2022 Sesame Street Writing Fellow. She has worked extensively in kids media and is passionate about making math joyful through storytelling. It's also amazing, she was a math and finance major in college, so she can tell you more about that. And then lastly, but not least, we have Minette Louie. Minette, give me just a moment here. So Minette is a Spirit Award-winning Emmy and Critics' Choice nominated producer whose work includes Rosemead, starring Lucy Liu, I Carry You With Me, Swallow, The Tale, Gemini, The Imitation, and Land Ho. She serves on the Academy's Producers Branch Executive Committee, Film Independence Board of Directors, and co-heads creative producing at Columbia University. A Harvard grad and native New Yorker, she was named one of Business Insider's top producers to watch. So again, let's give our esteemed panelists a round of applause for joining us today. So with that introduction, let's dive in. Let's start off with a question about how each of you got into this wild and crazy ride of filmmaking. So here's the first question. Questions are a little out of order here. All right, to kick it off, what was it, or what moment that made you decide that this is the journey for you, producing and making films?
I can start. Okay. For me, I started off as an actress, as was already mentioned, and I found that I didn't love the roles I got called in for, and I thought that my career was pretty limiting. And that's even with, I was an ABC I was in the ABC Talent Showcase, and I was in the HBO showcase, so I did have a lot of things that were helping me, but then the roles, I think, were just really limiting. So I started to produce, and I didn't start writing until the pandemic, but I did start to produce maybe 3 or 4 years before the pandemic. I made a short film, and I acted it and produced because I just wanted to see, and it was an all-Asian film. It was called California Roll, and I ended up making a team of Sybil Santiago, and also, if anyone knows, this is old school, but if anyone knows Notorious MSG, you remember? Okay, well, so Ken Lin is part of that, is part of Notorious MSG, and he was also my director on, I used to host a show for AOL. So he was the director, and so I pulled this whole group together, and we made a very, short film that was an all-Asian cast and set in a sushi bar. So that's how I started. And then in the pandemic, I started writing, because there were not a lot of acting jobs in the pandemic. And fast forward to somebody about 2.5 years ago, somebody on a Facebook group asked for a writer who's of Asian descent. And I think a bunch of my friends were on that Facebook group, and people had mentioned you should reach out to Veronica Reyes-Howe. And we met, and long story short, he just wanted to finance a project that featured him as the lead. And so I created and wrote and produced him a project called Mother May I Have a Kidney, and that's what premiered at Tribeca. So that was kind of the first foray. First it was started with for myself, and then it became, I just am also helping other people produce their things.
Should I go next? Okay. I grew up in this fair city of ours, New York City, and grew up seeing all these film sets everywhere I went, and just becoming fascinated by how that circus is put together, all those machines and equipment and crew and cast, and so, and I'd always been right and left brained, and producing is the perfect marriage between creative and business. I also come from a family of artists. My dad used to sell paintings in Washington Square Park, and so grew up with art around me. But because my parents were artists, they said, don't go into the arts because you can't make any money. So I didn't, I went to Harvard, I studied Chinese film and literature, which was really impractical, but at least I had a Harvard degree, right? And then I graduated and worked in marketing and business development in traditional media space. And then 9/11 happened, and I sort of questioned what I was doing with my life, and then ended up basically, like, I didn't know anybody in the film industry. My parents are immigrants from China and Taiwan, and so I ended up PAing on an NYU student film in a Jersey City motel. I was literally rubbing like coffee grounds on the bathroom, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I fell in love with it because there was like a unity of purpose, it was all of these people working toward the same thing. And on that film, I met Mark Duplass, who's the star of that film. Eric Lynn was the DP, and he directed Rosemead, which I just premiered at Tribeca. The sound guy, Lyle, was our DP on Rosemead. So, over 20 years later, we ended up making a feature together, and I'm still in touch with and have collaborated with many people on that one NYU student film. I went on to produce 3 more NYU student films. This was before NYU even had a producing program, so I basically got a free NYU film school education, and then moved on to producing features, and here I am.
So I was born and raised in Malaysia, and ever since I was a kid, I just loved movies. But it just felt so unattainable and not accessible. I'm not even from Kuala Lumpur. I'm from this island called Penang, and my father is a motorcycle mechanic, so nothing seemed attainable from this little island, living in this little shop. But then, so I thought, how am I going to get out of Malaysia? I'm going to get out of my situation. There came an opportunity to do journalism in the United States. So that was my entry point into America 20 plus years ago. So I became a journalist first, even though in my heart I wanted to make movies. But slowly along the way, I became one of my first or early jobs in my career. I became a camera person for the Newswire. And that's when I started filming a lot for the Associated Press, and then at some point, because I wasn't a resident or a citizen of the United States, at some point you know how it is, you exhaust your visa. So like, where do I want to go? I don't want to go back to Malaysia, so I ended up becoming a camera person based in India. And that's when my love for filmmaking and as a storyteller really grew. But again, being based there, having no connections, and having so much more experience in journalism, I had to go back to journalism. and I became a reporter for the New York Times, and they moved me to New York. So the filmmaking thing had to take I had to park it a little bit. But then at some point, there were opportunities to get into documentary filmmaking. I did make a film before I joined the New York Times, a short documentary. But then I went back to news for the New York Times, and then I became a documentary commissioner for Al Jazeera English, looking after US, Canada, and Latin America. And I thought to myself, maybe at that point I thought to myself, maybe the field doesn't need another director. Maybe it needs producers who's able to move funds into the hands of creatives, because there are just so many. And so I did that, and then, but I always wanted to go back to directing and filmmaking, but I did that for 5 years. And I produced a film, a short documentary that ended up getting nominated for the Oscars. So that's when I realized, like, I can really do this as a producer. But I still wanted to go back to make films. But it's still, how do I get into it? But anyway, park that aside. I ended up becoming a grants director for this organization called the Independent Documentary Association, and raised $1.2 million for independent filmmakers. So, again, I thought, you know what? There's no need for another director. Just produce. And then I became an executive for Disney, and produced a couple of shows. One which actually was nominated for the Emmys yesterday. So, but all is to say, I like producing. I think I'm good at it. But last year I decided I'm gonna quit my job. I'm gonna empty out my life savings, and I'm going into directing. So now I'm finally returning to it after some 20 years. And it's extremely thrilling. So I'm shifting now. I'm producing and I'm directing.
Can you plug your Emmy nominated?
Yes.
So the movie that was nominated for the Emmys for primetime yesterday is called Patrice the Movie. It's on Hulu and Disney. It's a disability romantic comedy documentary, but there are recreation elements in it, and it's we had to build a set for the recreations, and we hired children to play out the entire recreation. So something fun. I love scripted, so I try to pick films that have scripted elements, even though it's documentary.
And it's available on streaming.
It's on Hulu, Disney. Yeah.
Can you also plug the Oscar-nominated film?
That was the before times. That was a while ago. St. Louis Superman.
And it's a documentary. It's a full feature. Okay, great. So I'm hearing several things. We all have 3 very unique representatives, unique journeys here. So there's no one singular path into this industry we call film and television. And I also want to bring up the topic of commerce itself, the business side. Minette brought up the fact that her parents were artists, and she was told, do not pursue this, you will not make money. So being intentional and strategic about I'm going to go into something that has the potential to make money for me and provide me a standard of living. So let's if you could all speak to that. Here's a question. So one of the trickiest balancing acts in filmmaking is navigating creative ambition, right, left-right brain, while staying realistic about what's feasible, whether that's the budget, the timing, the schedule, audience demand. How do you personally approach that balance, if there is a balance?
There's never enough time, and there's never enough money on every single movie, and it's getting worse, unfortunately. Just as an example, Rosemead, it took 8 years to make, we had to find 16 investors, and once we finally got the money and we were in pre-production, we had to cut 65 scenes out of the script in order to fit it within our schedule, and that was painful. I had to cut my favorite scene, we cut our DP's favorite scene. We were like, do we even have a movie left, Should we string it together, what do we do? And my next movie, which is in post-production, was like that too. And it's just been so challenging, like dealing with inflation and everything going up. and on the marketplace being the way it is. So it's incredibly hard right now and challenging for anyone trying to do this in right now. How do I put a positive spin on that? I don't know. Somebody else help me out here.
You know, things have changed a lot in the after the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, I will say making art, independent film art, has always been hard. You know, and so whenever people ask like, oh, what should I do? How do I navigate this? One thing to not do, especially if you're starting out in independent filmmaking, don't quit the day job. You literally can't be an artist and do the stuff you love if you're starving. That's one. The second thing is like figuring out how much reserves you have. If you have any reserves at all, to be able to make your art for like several months. And the last thing, actually this I'm gonna quote. I actually attended. I thought this was very, very good advice. I attended a fundraiser, and the keynote speaker for this fundraiser for this independent documentary film festival. He's actually like the CFO of Telfar, you know, the handbag Telfar. And so he gave this piece of advice because he was being honored that evening, and he said, everybody's fundraising here, now and everybody's an artist here, and he said, I'm gonna give you a little bit of unsolicited advice. And I was like, what is he gonna say? And he said, if you're gonna make art with other people's money and start a revolution, you better be good at lying to them. So that was the piece of advice. I was like, it does have some, some truth in that. You have to be able to convince in individuals and entities with money to trust you to make your independent art. But how are you gonna do it? That is the challenge, and there's an art to it, and there are barriers to entry, of course.
And there's several layers of subtext to that too that he's implying, and the line is that in more cases than not, you're probably not going to make money for the investor or the funder. Yeah. So
I'll add to that. It depends on what kind of films or what kind of art you're trying to make. Even for me, and I'll tell you from my portfolio of work, there's a portion of the film or the series that I'm producing or executive producing that is commercial. And then there's a portion the one where I exhausted my life savings, I'm like, this one is for me. But even then, you still have to raise money for that. And then there's a portion of the work portfolio where like, this has got nothing to do with all this, and this is fast money. This is to keep the lights on, this is to keep the electricity, pay your overheads, because you need that coming in if you're going to do the art in the long term.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I would also, I think my journey has been a little bit different, and it might seem, and I'm newer to this than everybody else. So I'll start with, I have also different mode. So the project that premiered at Tribeca, the lead actor financed it, the entire production, and his father had contacted me and said, so just every month give me a P&L and make sure to post P&L and I was like, it's all L. It's all L. There's no P. And I'm like, I don't even know that we can get to a P. We may never get to a P. So just know what you've gotten into is all L. And if we ever make a P, kudos to us. And I think that's, that's the thing is I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna be the best producer because I just try to say the thing. I will say two things that I think are encouraging. I do have a math and finance background. That's what I majored in college. And I don't know how it translates when I have meetings with people. I know that when I look at budgets, I can see where their priorities are. And, I guess if you know numbers, right? You can see what people are thinking and how they look at stuff. But I've met with various investors. I'll also backtrack to, I play sports in the city, and a lot of times people will say, what do you do? And a friend of mine was saying, you don't need to tell people what you do. You don't need to, but I always tell people I'm a writer, I don't know, I choose which category I'm gonna tell them. I'm a writer. And people get really interested. So I like sharing with people my journey, and that has actually gotten me a base of financial investors. and people who are like, I would love to, but one thing a couple of them have said, they're like, it's very obvious when talking to you, you actually know numbers, and that you have integrity, and that you are really forthcoming. And so those are the things, and these are private investors. I don't even know how I lucked into this, but a lot of women who say, I have to give away $3-5 million a year. These are.
Could you introduce them to me?
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of folks here would love it.
And I'm like, a lot of these people are everywhere. But I do think it does take, I will tell you, a lot of these people also don't reveal that right away, okay, right? So it's just conversations, and people ask me questions, and I just share things, and so that's really interesting in terms of like, where do you find money? That's potentially one of them too. I think being really upfront with people and making sure they understand what they're getting into with the money. And then 3, I would just also say there's so much creative money out there in terms of working with a distributor and getting them to sell territories based on the script that they like part of your work. There's funding. There's just all these other different funding ways. You have to be creative. There's a lot of applications, but that's also how I became a writer. I applied to every writing competition out there, and that's how I built a career as a writer. And so as funding sources, make sure on Instagram you look at all of these competitions. It might sound a little bit pie in the sky, but I do think that, be really passionate about creating these applications, making sure your answers and your financials are on there, because there's a lot of funding sources for films and independent TV that are looking to give money, and I've gotten money from some of them. So I would just say that also exists out there.
Can I just say something? I disagree with what the CFO said about lying to people, because while only like, I don't think they've done a study recently about how many films return or give a return on investment, but I think the last one I read years ago was something like 2% of all funding invested in independent films makes back their money. 2%, which means 98% of it doesn't get paid back, right? Which is huge, crazy odds. However, I believe that you should be honest and upfront about how risky an investment in an independent film is, because you don't want your investors to sue you for lying to them, basically, so that's quite dangerous. But every film that I take on as a producer, I 100% believe in, even if it is a dark story or something that is not so obvious. Like, I have to believe that there's an audience for it, and people will go buy tickets for it, or like it'll win awards and get, basically noticed that way, so there's something about it that I have to believe in. And so when you're talking to an investor, you tell them, you have to convince them, because and in order to do that, you have to, convince yourself that it can hit it out of the park, and if you don't think it can, if you think it's a money loser, but you want to make it anyway, you want to be upfront about that also, right? But you do have to be honest with them, you can be honest with yourself, and also to mitigate the risks for the investors. Like, you're gonna be like, listen, I can't eliminate all risk for an independent film. It's really stupid what you're doing, but if you have money to burn, go right ahead, but like, we could lose it all, but I think that there's a decent chance that I'm gonna make your money back. It's gonna be an amazing movie. It's gonna stand the test of time, and you'll be forever proud to put your name on this thing.
I think first agree with Minette, and I think what the CFO Minette. I'm so sorry, Minette. My apologies, Minette. But I think what the CFO actually meant, we have to be really good at packaging it. And what I would add to that is, I think it's also very important for you to be honest and truthful to yourself when you look at what you have, the skills that you have, and also the film idea or the project that you have. And then surveying in the marketplace, like, what else is like it out there? Is there, how is this gonna do well? Like, what in the entire ether, are there good comps? Is this the right time for it? Because the last thing you want to do is sort of swim upriver at a time when it is very, very difficult. And so I think doing any kind of film, I think you have to believe that you can do it, but at the same time, sometimes some ideas need to be parked for another time, and sometimes you have to know, like, this is going to take several years and I'm going to do other things. That's just very, very important.
So being the producers, you're weighing the realities and the challenges of finding the money, right, to pay for the film. Without the funding, without the financing, the film doesn't happen. So in terms of the investors, can you speak to what, in your experiences, what reasons investors would get involved in your project? So Minette spoke a bit to that, as well as Veronica, as well as Poe. So what reasons do you find in your experience investors wanting to get involved?
I think that's a really important question to ask yourself when you're trying to fundraise, and also because it's going to be different for different investors. There are some investors I've met people have introduced me to them saying, they make their money in oil, they make their money in this, they don't care, they'll just give you money, but you've got to sell them, right? You've got to, and to that point, it's not just about selling, it's, and this is something that I've always had to navigate is, do I tell you what you want to hear? Do I tell you my passion behind it? Is it a mix of both things? You know, so I feel like there's all kinds of different investors, and I went to AFM 2 years ago, American Film Market. It's an indie film market, and I met financiers there too, and I felt like I met more financiers who were interested in making their money back. So it's really important, I think, just to keep an Excel spreadsheet if you're a producer. Here are these investors who want to be contacted when you feel like you have something that will, generate revenue. It's like your Midwest doctor or your Midwest lawyer who, I came from the Midwest, so I can say that, who is interested in being in the film and would like to come to the red carpet or premiere of something, but also would like to see return on their money. Then there's also these people who you meet, and I've mostly met them here in New York, I've been connected to people who are like, they don't need the money back. They don't care, they make their money in X, Y, Z. So they're just looking to be part of something that will have some notoriety. They actually expect losers. So I also know a whole network of people who invest in Broadway. And if you know anything about Broadway, it's pretty much all losers. It's like there's no money to be made there. It's mostly just to, say you're an investor, they like being part of it, and then maybe there's a Hamilton somewhere in the 30 or 40 shows that they've invested in. So I think it's knowing how to appeal to what people have and also knowing what they expect out of the experience. And then there's just the other side of it where people have said, I just want to be on the red carpet, or I want to meet Brad Pitt, or I want to have those things. And I never guarantee any of that, but then there are things I've been involved with that have had celebrities, so then that's exciting for them, and they're paying for that experience.
A lot of it ultimately comes down to the story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and when you meet the investor or the person you're talking to, like, are they interested in it? Are they interested in you? Are they interested in, are they sitting at the edge of their seats? These days, a lot of people want to make the money back, but there are also folks who've already made tons of money that don't need to make it back. One thing that I've done, and this is for a film that I'm currently directing, like a portion of the budget, the way I make it exciting for investors, the portion where it's investment and not grants and not private donors, I cap it. I cap it at a certain amount, and I say, let's say 300,000, right? I cap equity at 300,000, and I said I put 150,000. So I'm not gonna run away with your money and not, So that then the share of profits, should you make a sale, is more exciting for the investor. But more than the capping of equity, so that it's more exciting for the investor, it really comes down to the story, and do they want to back you? Do they see in you and the film that you're making? A lot of times people some investors do it for money, and some investors do it for money plus legacy. And if it's legacy, then it's like people oftentimes want to shift. They want to back a film that will shift politics and culture. So can you do that? So that's part of the conversation. But it depends on the film as well. Some films are like straight up commercial, and then some films are for the love of the art. So.
provide some examples, commercial versus the social impact film?
Yeah, very simply, like commercial films would be just like celebrity films. Those are can be commercial. Though I will say that the amount that the celebrities take from production, that's very expensive. So I don't know how lucrative it can be. So that, and then some formats and some genres that are very cringy, that will get a lot of eyeballs, so that can be very commercial. But that's one aspect. But that doesn't mean that art and good art and beautiful political art cannot be commercial. So it depends on it depends on the story. It comes back to that. But you can always make good political independent art and it can be formatted in a commercial manner. It can be following all the tricks of your favorite TV shows and your favorite movies. It can be cut that way. And as a director, you decide, is that the direction you want to go?
Just to sort of add to what everyone's saying, if you're not making Superman or Emily in Paris, if you're making something that has a social issue, then the first place you would go actually is your friends and family in your immediate circle who want to invest in you as a producer, director, writer, or actor. I've had a lot of actually financiers offer to finance my films. I put their daughter or wife or son in the movie. I've turned everyone down. But so friends and family, people who want to support the social issue that your film is about, like Rosemead is about mental health in the Asian American community, so all 16 of our investors, except for one white guy, were Chinese American. Or like my film The Tale was about child sexual abuse, and so almost all the investors had experience with that or wanted to support that issue and support survivors. And so that's about the story. There's a whole segment of investors who have made their money in really boring industries, they're dentists or doctors or whatever, and they want to go to Cannes, they want to go to Sundance, they want to walk the red carpet, they want to meet stars. So that's a whole other segment as well. But you have to kind of read each one and see what they want to get out of it. And if it's money that they want, if it's a return that they want, it'll be apparent from the deal that they counter, right? You'll basically ask them to invest equity in your movie, and they'll say, well, can I be first out, or can I give you a loan against your tax credit, and that's when you know that they just want the money back and they want their name on it, but they don't want to actually take a risk and have any skin in the game.
It's for documentary, and I'm not so familiar with fiction. It is very, I would advise against looking and going for investors that are purely in for the money. It's too much risk for them. They cannot handle it, So I'm not sure if it's in
yes,
fiction.
I agree with that. Basically you say that money is ROI should be sort of number 5 on the list of their goals.
So they go in knowing that, they don't go in with these crazy expectations, because if they want to make money, they should go, invest in a sports team or something. Yeah.
This is great. So we spent a good amount of time discussing funding strategies and sort of how to gauge investors. But what other advice as producers can you offer in terms of putting a project together, whether that's film or television? What advice can you give to help get the project off the ground in addition to the funding aspect?
Make friends with lots of high-profile actors, because everybody wants you to attach actors first. There's always that chicken and egg question: what comes first, cast or financing? 99% of the time, it's cast, whether in film or television. Television has to sort of mimic the packaging function of film, where you have to have a director and actors attached before you even pitch it to a studio. So make friends with lots of actors somehow.
Manette, this is a good city for that. This city is full of talent and full of, quite frankly, A-list actors living down the street. So
I would also add to that, make friends with casting directors. So even before I became very like worked full time as an actress, I would intern at casting offices and meet all the casting directors, and I think that ended up translating later when I got some traction in my career, like through ABC and HBO. Then these casting directors were like, oh, wow, okay, we already know you. But then it's the casting directors who are usually the people who, so you can either go directly to an actor or you can go through a casting director who, you know, a lot of the casting directors I know, they cast a wide variety of either like films, TV. The director on Mother May Have a Kidney, which is at Tribeca, is a friend of mine who, he cast Spotlight, he cast Pitch Perfect, and he had never directed a film before. He had been a theater director and a casting director, obviously, but I pulled him on as a director. But so I know him and actually a wide network of, I think I know all the casting directors, maybe with the exception of one in New York City. That's been really helpful in terms of looking at casting and finding actors, which do help the financing. And then one other thing about producing, I would just say, I learned this really, and I think both women here have a lot more experience, so they probably knew who, and it sounds like they were coming up with different people, so you knew who you were on crew with and you knew who you were staffing, and I'm looking at this now, trying to build, and I'm sure this is not a foolproof plan, but I'm just trying to build a structure around how I hire and what I'm looking for, and how do I figure out, or how do I test what these people will be like, because so often things happened on set and even during production or post-production that fell apart, and they were like minor emergencies, and I was always the person caught holding the bag. So I'm very cautious now, thinking about who are the people that can stick through the whole thing with me and who will help make it go, because I don't think that's always obvious when you're hiring people if you haven't worked with them for many years.
That's really good advice. And also, the people that you work with and you like, you're gonna work with them again and again, chances are. And so, you know, I'm like, from my own experience right now, since I've gone back into directing, like these are all friends, cinematographer friends, editing friends, or even, you know, like, so now that I'm directing my own film, I'm like asking them, if you believe in this film and you want to be part of it, and you know, looking at the market, it's not so great, like the budget is only this much. Because and one thing that's very important, you know, be realistic with the climate of the market right now. I'll tell you, in documentaries, people used to think like, okay, the budget's like, and it's much cheaper than scripted for sure, but 1.52 million for a documentary. Average span take about 5 years on average to make. Like, can you make it for 875? You know, and then the friends that you meet, like, you know, this is one for the commercial projects, like you get the full rate for this, can you do it for 60% or 50%? If editing is 5,000 per week, can you do it for 3,000? I'll get you another gig in the commercial project. So if you have friends that in a variety of roles, then you can help each other on each other's projects. And it's not ideal, of course, you know, everybody should be getting the full rate, but you know, this is one way to sort of make it work. And then, you know, you can move, if you have the opportunity to like introduce them to other more commercial gigs or move them around, like that's when you can pay it back. And then fingers crossed, if it goes all the way or it goes far, then their careers, you have to make sure as the producer, as the director, that you back their careers like as well, like for as long as you can, you know. So that's how you're in it together, and then it will be a wonderful journey, and you can sort of help each other along the way, because filmmaking is so difficult, and it's becoming less and less sustainable. I will say, like it's really, really difficult to break through right now. Like it's much harder than it was before, and I don't envy anybody who's just coming in right now. But so that's just a thought. But then also the flip side to that, you know, another thought. I was watching these old, and I'm in documentary, so I was watching like films that were made in the 60s, films that were made in the 80s, documentaries. And then one thing I realized immediately, it's always been hard. So, so that's just the life of an independent artist. And can you live with that? And then what can you live without? But New York City is very expensive.
Can I just add, sorry, I love what you both said, and I want to add, because it's just jogging my brain, which is something I tell my students all the time. I teach at Columbia. That's my day job, by the way. That allows me to feed my indie producing habit. But what I tell my students is to really look to your peers and make form strong relationships with your peers, because someday they'll be in a position to help you, So you guys, your film, you probably have films at this festival. Talk to each other. It's way more useful than like coming to talk to me. Just talk to each other. The people I used to do karaoke with 20 years ago, like one of them is the head of acquisitions at Neon now. The other one's, head of production at Apple, and so you move up with these people, and they're your peers. So like, just make sure you form strong relationships horizontally.
Yes, so in short, make friends with, we'll have time for Q&A. I know you're all anxious to ask questions. We'll get there soon. Make friends, yes, make friends with everyone. Actors, peers, that will eventually be your professional colleagues in this space. So we hinted towards the struggles, the challenges, not just
Hinted.
We can dive some more. Let's dive in some more. So we know, this as Poe mentioned, it is harder to break in, so to speak. But to counter that, Manette's point about the fact that you will grow, and as they say, all boats rise together. So, given that there are still challenges, sort of the real day-to-day challenges within financing, but also distribution. Can you speak to that as well? The challenges within distribution.
We need a whole new panel on that, because distribution is the main problem right now. It's not financing, right? Because like Veronica said, there's always people with money to burn that you can find somehow. It takes time, but they're there. But once you get the financing and make the movie, who's gonna put it out there? And there's such a bottleneck with distribution right now, particularly if you're not making an obvious commercial film with white people in it, and because most of the decision makers at the distribution companies are still white people who don't really understand what it's like, or how to really figure out how to properly market a film that's not about white people, and get it out there. So that's a challenge for anyone who makes films not about white people. And also, it's not just, who's at the current film distribution companies, but it's what the audience is competing with, right? Video games, YouTube, verticals, there's all manner of things. Like, I have a 9-year-old son, and all he watches is YouTube. I'm like, I subscribe to Disney and all this stuff. Can you please watch the more expensive, high-quality productions? And he doesn't care. He just watches the stupid, people playing Roblox on YouTube. Like, literally, it's the stupidest thing. But anyway, so it's challenging, and getting eyeballs and getting people to go to the theater, all of that is really challenging right now. And I think distributors are looking for films that sell themselves. They're not looking for films that take work to sell. So, right now there is a crisis in independent film where all these producers are like, listen, for my next film, I think I'm gonna actually raise P&A financing, prints and advertising. That's basically the money you need to distribute a film, so that I have a pot of money to go distribute this film myself and put it in theaters myself and market it myself, in case the Neons and A24s of the world don't want to buy it. So that's something you really have to think about as filmmakers. I know it's really hard to raise money just for production. To have to raise another, $1 million for distribution is like, it seems like an impossible task. But I think it's sort of necessary now if you really want to get your film out there, because no one's going to give you that bespoke, custom distribution TLC that your film needs if it's a little more difficult than just like, Emily in Paris.
Yeah, I agree. I think distribution has even changed. So from last year to this year. Last year, I got a couple distribution deals just by meeting people and talking to people. And I don't, I'm going to regurgitate some of the things that I've learned or some things that people have told me in terms of distribution. When this is my first narrative, and I'm a new writer, EP, producer, etc. But I had talked with different distributors who were interested if I had other properties or other things, which I don't currently. I'm in production for another thing, and I have something else that will be more visible in the fall as well. So it's going to take a little bit of time for my things to show that I have a track record, but distribution was a little bit, the offers that we got initially were based on the idea that I have more things to come because they're interested in the creator. Then we got into Tribeca, and you'd think, wow, now the deals should go up. They did not. One deal went down. One deal went from an MG, a minimum guarantee, to having no minimum guarantee. And I just thought, well, that's reverse. So I think one part is true, that the distribution is very hard. I also think as newer filmmakers or filmmakers, you're making the relationships. So make the relationships and just, keep a track record. It's the same thing that you do for, building your career as a writer or as a producer. You're building your track record. And then the other part is, I've heard a lot of talk, especially at Tribeca, and I've joined almost every distribution Facebook group you can on Facebook, and I just ask a lot of questions. I did get kicked out of one for asking too many questions. I probably asked some seriously stupid questions. I had a meeting with, I can't even remember who they were, but they're a huge distributor, and I asked questions about it. I said, can anyone tell me, if they've met someone from here?
So they kicked you out?
They kicked me out. Yeah, I know. They said, we don't want you on this. I think it was because it was mostly some of these distribution groups are really helpful, because I'll say what I did is I've contacted I asked questions and also contacted different filmmakers, and I'm a finance person, right? Originally. So I say, I just ask very bold questions like, could I see your quarterly report? Or what were you making? Or how did, what were the breakdowns of, and then also I asked for strategy. Like somebody at Tribeca was telling me their strategy, they're doing independent distribution. So their film, and I've already found this out, they're doing a they just made a four-wall deal meaning putting it in a theater and just doing your own premiere in a theater, because what happens is that will unlock a higher level of SVOD, which is subscription video on demand, like being on Disney. So there's just all these different, I guess, I can't detail all of them, but there's just so much information out there, and filmmakers I find are very generous, except for the one that I got kicked off of, that you can talk to people about how they're making their money back. I'll give you one number just so this helps you. This one person had a film, they then did a screening. I think it was just in a New York theater here, and they paid $10,000 for the four-wall screening, and then their revenue report from making better deals was like $80,000 in 1 year. That's definitely worth the money, right? So it's important to talk to a lot of different, and then I heard that same story mimicked by a filmmaker at Tribeca, because that's what they're doing. So it's important to just talk to people about distribution, and it's sounding like there's ways to really also create your own distribution if you can't get offers. And then the last thing I'll say is Mark Duplass and Seed and Spark have done a couple of indie distribution kind of plans, and I think those videos are online, and I'm still watching and just figuring out what makes sense.
By the way, I will say self-distribution is not new. I had to self-distribute my very first feature that premiered at Sundance in 2009, which was an Asian American film called Children of Invention. And so it's not a new thing. It's been around since the dawn of independent film, right? It's just right now we're at a crisis point because of all the things that I mentioned.
One thing that you mentioned earlier, so in the budgeting, I broke my budget into two parts so that it was easier and more digestible for financiers and distributors. One part was to finish the full film, and another part, $650, like whatever, to publicity and self-distribution. But then I break it into two so that it's easier for people to comprehend. And as someone who has been a decision maker at different distributors, Like my current film right now, I knew like, okay, the current economic climate, political climate for my film is difficult for distribution, but as filmmakers, we still think we can do it. So one thing that I thought, this is how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna hire the best. I mean, you always want to hire the best people, of course, but also strategic key decisions so that I can do pre-sales. So like for example, like I'm strong in certain markets, for example. So I can take certain parts of Asia. I worked in the Middle East, so I can sell pre-sales in different parts. And then like so I'm producing my co-producer. She's Danish and she's a member of the Academy, and she's also nominated for the Oscars. And she can take Scandinavia and different parts of Europe. So if we had to pre-sale it instead of selling it to like a Netflix or HBO, because that deal is never going to happen, we can sell these different parts. And then my editor, she was nominated for 2 Oscars this year, Emma Yamazaki, and she's strong in Japan, so we could take that region as well. So we're thinking of it, okay, if we can't make the sale to a big streamer, then let's take these pre-sale regions. It's not going to be as lucrative, but in our budget, I think we can do it, and so that's how we're thinking of it. But then I would say as of 2 months ago, I was like, it's going to be very hard, uphill battle to get a distributor, and a month ago, a distribution deal came through. And that was a result of just the way we thought about how we were going to distribute it, had a distributor not come along, and they like that. And so they like it because they can see, okay, you're scrappy and you're trying to do it a little differently. So so yeah, but you just have to be really, really creative in how you're going to do it, and set your expectations low, or not crazy budgets, so that so it's more attractive.
Before we move on to career sustainability and really, really what it means to sustain yourself mentally and health-wise so that you can do what you're able to do. Now with the producer, unlike the directors usually fall off, we can say, at a certain point. Producers, however, you are staying with the duration of the project all the way through, luckily, if you're lucky, through distribution. So what does it mean, let's say, Minette, for Rosemead, or for a project that you're working on that doesn't have distribution at this point? What does that mean for you as the producer?
Well, Rosemead, we're still trying to sell. We just premiered, 6 weeks ago, and WME still trying to sell it. But I am with my films forever. I lug them around like tin cans, on a string, because I have to do the taxes on them every single year, and pay out, distribute my earnings to my investors. And it's a big pain in the butt. My directors don't have to do this; I have to, as the producer. So, and I'm part of this group called Producers United. That is sort of, I wouldn't say unionizing, but trying to set some standards, because we get stuck with a lot of crap, and it's not fair, and we don't get compensated for it, So we have a lot of work. I mean, I've produced, 30 films, and so, and it's gotten to the point where tax season is hell for me, and honestly, when I look at a new film that's pitched to me, oh, that's so interesting, and it's such a great story, and I'm thinking, oh my God, do I want to do the taxes on this in 10 years? Yeah. So you have to be prepared for that as an independent producer, Did I answer your question, or did I just complain about my life?
You answered it. It's good. It's a good answer. Veronica, do you have anything to add to that?
The question was, I thought, specifically about Rosemead, but you're saying, just thinking about distribution.
Long term.
Well, and that's the thing is, I'm newer to this, so I actually didn't know that the producers.
Oh, we have to. Oh, there was a film that came out, by the way, on the bright side of that. Every year, I get a fat back-end check from Sony for a film that I did over 10 years ago. And I distribute it to my actors and my director, my cast and crew, and everybody's very happy. It's the summer, back-end check that I get. But that was back in the day when, we had traditional, windows, whereas theatrical, DVD, and transactional VOD and SVOD, nowadays, people just pay you something up front and that's it. You don't see anything else on the back end because the windows have collapsed, or it's just a streaming deal, or and that is what the industry has done to us filmmakers. They haven't. They took a hit-driven business model and they flattened it and made everybody poor.
We will plan a separate distribution panel.
I'll say there's so much self-doubt. Even I have so much self-doubt. To be real with you, like there are a lot of times you feel like an absolute failure. And I'm talking about all the different projects that I've worked in over the past 20 years. There's so many extended moments I'm like, I don't know how to do this anymore. And so it's so important to surround yourself with people who can pull you out. I don't know how to pull myself out. So that's I think we talk so much about distribution and portfolio and budgets, and one thing that I'm constantly reminded of by my partner, who has supported me emotionally for 15 years, is like, do you have a balanced portfolio in your life? And most filmmakers don't. This is the reality. And so if you have somebody who loves you a lot, who can pull you out, that's so important. It's just because it's such an intense, whether you're a producer, director, or you're just in filmmaking in general, there are more losses than there are wins. So you have to learn how to count your wins and expect losses. One way of thinking that I prep myself to as I get into any film, this is the last one, so all chips in. If this doesn't work out, it's fine. I've lived many different lives. I've done many interesting things. I'm out. I want to do something else in my life. Every single film, I think, all chips in. So that's one way of thinking. It's not healthy.
All or nothing. That's a great segue, Poe, to the question regarding sustainability. This industry is a marathon, not a sprint by any means. What helps you, Veronica, and then Minette, to stay in this game, especially during the slower or more uncertain seasons? It's uncertain now. So what do you do to take care of yourself?
Well, I also want to start with a couple things just about sustainability. I think what's so great about doing things that are hard and difficult is that you learn, and that you have to, it's through a struggle that you become stronger. And without any struggle, you wouldn't learn the lessons that you have. So for me particularly, I learned from being a producer that I have catastrophic thinking. And so I would come home from a day, I'm like, everybody hates me. And then I would have to stop myself and say, is that true? Does everybody hate me? Then I always have to say, no, the director doesn't hate me, the lead actor doesn't hate me, the financier doesn't hate me, and I'd have to go, I'm like, oh, it's because of this one incident, and it's colored and changed my whole perspective on something. So I think that to me is a new tool I use all the time now, just to say, whenever I have a thought and it drags me down, I just say, what is true? Is this true? And also, what's the reality, and how can I frame this in a way that has more hope? In terms of sustainability, I just feel like my faith is a big part of me as a person. I've said this over and over, my worth is not in my work. So my identity and my worth come from something outside of the things that I accomplish and do. Doesn't mean that I don't love accomplishing things and that success isn't important. I think the one thing I can say about myself as an artist is I work like a dog, which probably everybody who's an artist can say the same thing. I'm like, to me, I think 16 hours, when I was in tech, I used to work 16-hour days, and I became an actress because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm making a lot of money, I'm not happy, and I work long hours. And so that's how I ended up going to an open call for rent and then booking rent. But back to working 16, 18-hour days. and making way less money than I was in tech. But I love it. So, that's part of it. So I work really hard as if unto God. And for me, it's not about me or the success of things. I feel like I have a deeper purpose in the work. So that's what sustains me.
I think the idea of impermanence is important in this life of filmmaking because, you know, there have been times where I've done the indie thing and that's all I've done, and I don't have like a, you know, job to like pay my bills, but then I have to stop doing the indie producing thing and go get a job and do that for a couple of years. So like for a couple of years I worked in the Hawaii Film Commission, and then I came back to indie filmmaking. And then for a couple of years I ran a film fund, which was a lucky job to get, but like it was a job. And each one of these jobs adds to, you know, my education and my network and my learning as an independent producer. But they took me away from what I love most, which is producing and making movies, right? But it's okay because I always came back to indie producing, you know. Now I'm a full-time professor at Columbia, you know, and I spend my summers making movies. I spend, you know, my winters making movies. I spend all my free time. Actually, when I was shooting Rosemead, which is set in Rosemead, California, so we're supposed to shoot in California, we moved it to New York in part because of my teaching schedule. So I basically teach 2 classes on Mondays back to back. We would shoot Tuesday through Saturday, and then I had Sunday to spend with my son. It was crazy, but, you know, made it work somehow. And like, you know, like I said, my job at Columbia is great and also adds to my sort of worldview as a producer. And so don't worry about having to take the full-time job, you know, but it's, you know, as a producer, you sort of have to AD your life anyway. You know, you have so much going on. Even if you didn't have a full-time job, like just the sheer number of projects that you have to juggle, you really have to AD your life. And so, you know, I think you should be open to finding work that is outside of independent producing or independent filmmaking, and then you'll always come back to it. If it is your calling, you will always come back to it.
One thing that helped me a lot when in moments when I'm lost as an artist in filmmaking, I go and see how other artists and other types of art, how they're doing. I go and, you know, like last year I was having a little bit of like I don't know what I wanted to do with my life anymore, and I was like having you know, what do I do? So I sought out like Sufi devotional singers. I sought out certain types of artists making political art, and the realization from seeing other artists was that making art is very difficult. So how did they make it work? What were they willing to live without? And then these questions I asked myself, and then I realized, okay, so this is how I can do it for the long term.
Okay, we'll jump into audience Q&A shortly. But before we do, one last question, because it's been heavy on sort of the challenges, the red flags, the obstacles that are par for the course when it comes to this path, filmmaking. Well, what promising things do you see currently in this industry? What is promising? What is encouraging? What is positive?
I would just say, I think that I'm newer in this career and I've been able to sort of carve out some space. And I feel like it's not, like I can reiterate, like I'm not special. There's nothing special about me. I think that it is a mix of hard work and connections and friendships and you know, pounding the pavement. So I'm really enthused about the fact that there are open doors for people to start and to make a career. I became a writer, but I also worked at it really hard. When I wasn't a writer, I took classes and I spent 8 hours. This is in the pandemic, so, and I remember I was an actor and then I only had 2 voiceover jobs when the pandemic hit, so then I would just do those remote voiceover jobs and then I'd have so much time. So I would say, if I want to get to be a good writer, I'd have to spend 8 hours in the chair. And I did, just nonstop 8 hours in the chair. And you know, I have a large selection of scripts now and things. So it's a lot of the work, but I think I was a nobody and I didn't have connections and I didn't have, you know, people who were championing me. I did a lot of writing competitions I just used Instagram to find out what was out there that you could make a name for yourself. And then one thing that I would also just say that's really hopeful is I love what Minette and I think everybody sort of shared about making friends with peers. I just think it feels like a lot of times things that happened to me were lucky, but I also want to go back at different times. People have told me, oh, my intern kept talking. This is when I was an actress, and I was getting called in for a lot of things, and I think friends around me were like, at the time they were like, why you? Like, why do you get so many things and opportunities? I was just like, I don't know. But one casting director did say, my intern, you were so nice to my intern. And they kept saying, like, every time there was a list to be put on, they wanted your name on it. And I thought, oh, I've been going in that office for 4 years. I had no idea. That intern also is now a casting director. So, you know, it's really important how you treat people, not because that intern or that person is going to become something later, but just, I do think that that's really important. It's like every person, every life has value. And I think I benefited so often from people, from that philosophy, and then people helped open doors for me. So I don't say do it because you're gonna get open doors, but I do think that is a big part of like me as a newcomer, getting a lot of different opportunities.
I look at, I think what gives me hope and a lot of excitement is I think about my daughter. So I'm Chinese from Malaysia. My partner, husband, he's Indian. So when I look at my daughter, she represents two worlds, both a billion population, a billion plus population, right? That's a large chunk of the world. And when you look at it just in the context of the United States, Asians are a growing population as well in terms of our demographic. And so I'm excited and thrilled that, you know, it has already become mainstream in a lot of ways. Even in the past few years, and that's off the hard work of a lot of creatives before. So I'm excited for that. It's not easy. I mean, when you look at the reality of our political climate, you know it's hard. You're getting pummeled right now. Every which way you look, in terms of funding, in terms of policy. But something about, for me, looking at my daughter and knowing that there's a future there, and the fight now to get the money, to make the films, that in itself is thrilling. I've stopped now, actually, for I would say, in the past 2 years, just thinking of the goal and the outcome and then carrying forward. It is sometimes the very act of doing it, whatever it is that you feel so passionately about, and living at that moment, that is thrilling, that is exciting, and that is sometimes enough.
Amen, sister. Before we jump into Q&A, we still have a minute.
I'll just add really quickly, I think what excites me now is that there are so many tools out there just for us to use, right? Like, I hate the creator economy, but I'll say the creator economy just because, you know, like Eva Victor, she did videos and then made this award-winning Sundance film. This creator in Georgia made does anybody heard of Skibbity Toilet? Skibbity Toilet was optioned by Michael Bay, you know, so you could do something in your living room and have like somebody option it, you know, the Substacks of the world. There's just a lot of tools that you can use that are DIY, and so you can have the access, you can raise your own capital, you can do your own thing. So the tools are there. It's overwhelming to, you know, put it all together. It's way easier to just like sell your movie to an existing you know, pipeline, but the tools are there for you to use, so that's exciting. And I think as filmmakers, as creators, as adventurous spirits, as innovators, that can be an exciting thing.
All right, now it's your turn. Do we have mics for the audience? Or I guess, great. Just raise your hand and get a question right here. You can just shout. It's so close. We can hear you.
I didn't waste time passing the
I'm going to try to juggle a few different thoughts at the same time. I hope I can organize my thoughts well enough that it doesn't come out garbled and disorganized. Sort of taking off from what Minette and maybe Veronica was talking about earlier about anchoring projects around actors, and that being a very strong impetus for people to fund and so on and so forth. I'm curious about the flip side of that model, where an uncommon new talent comes around and there's a project that platforms that unconventional talent. Are you feel fueled by that kind of curiosity to seek out unconventionality? And where do you look for that?
As a creative person, 100%. I would way more prefer to discover a new actor than cast a known one. Honestly, like really, most of my directors would too. But the financiers, they want recognizable faces because that's what sells. So you remember what I said about distributors want films that sell themselves? A big part of it is being able to put a recognizable face on a poster. You know, there's nothing that like pleasures a creative person more than discovery. You know, and so just unfortunately, it's a tough road. So if you're gonna cast a no-name actor or an unknown actor, then you have to really shrink your budget down. Find funding from friends and family who support you and your vision.
Just very quickly, follow up on that comment. Given the risk-averse atmosphere, the climate that we live in right now, do you, when you do auditions, or if you attended auditions, do you find that the actors who are there, do you see that unconventionality sometimes come out in auditions, or do you find that the climate is so restrictive that a lot of people are kind of discouraged?
I'll speak to that. So a couple things from what you were saying. One, I'm a set coach. So I coach a handful of series regulars on their TV shows. And so for me also in casting, I feel like I can see when a talent sticks out, when it's not Jennifer Lawrence or whoever, Jennifer Aniston, any of the Jennifers. That's one thing. And then to address the second part of your question, I think it's really obvious. So in Mother May I Have a Kidney, we have no name actors. We got a lot of, I'm assuming this is normal for all films, but we got a lot of name talent. Some people who would because of my childhood, I'm like, these are my heroes, or people that I love watching on TV or films. And what stood out, we decided to go with actors who were best at the role. And so we don't have name talent. That may come back to bite us in terms of distribution. That's a reality. But we're looking at other things, as I detailed out before. But we specifically, the lead actress, I wrote, Mother May I Have a Kidney, I feel like the real lead is the mother. And I wrote her long monologues. I'm a newer writer, so I'm learning a lot of things, but I wrote long monologues. I mean, she was incredible. She was incredible, and she's a caustic, bitter woman who later becomes empathetic. And she just did such an amazing role. We didn't think about the other people who are names that we could have had. So it does stick out. And I do think that's an unconventional choice, so I do think the financial side of it,
what's your budget, right? I mean, you have to look at the budget and the types of financiers you were able to get, right? So if you're going for third-party institutional financing, you have to find actors, not just that people know, but that actually have a foreign sales value attached to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Great question. Anyone else?
I'm wondering if you could go into detail in the event. Oh, sorry. Thank you. In the event that you have multiple offers, I'm wondering if you could go into detail on your decision-making process outside of just the financial incentive. Like, what would make you go with one distributor over another, a streamer over a distributor, etc.
Money. Who's paying me the highest price? That is the number one. Because I will say whoever puts in the most money has the most skin in the game. They're going to work the hardest to make that money back. So that is a big determinant of who I go with. I don't think I've ever taken anything that is I've always taken the biggest offer. it just so aligned. I mean, you've heard stories like, I think The Farewell had an offer from Netflix versus A24. The Netflix offer was higher, but they ended up taking the A24 offer because they wanted a robust theatrical for that film, you know? And so I've never been offered that choice. If offered that choice, I may do the same thing. But you really just have to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Sometimes it's timeline of release, it's money, it's timeline of release, it's executive producers attached, it's whether or not they'll give you a robust awards campaign, if that's what you're looking for. It's a variety of things, but money is definitely at the top. Nobody would turn down money. But if you have several offers, that's when you get a better offer from the one that you actually want. So you can, see, you can talk to them and you're telling the other one that you're getting, because it's true, because you are weighing your options, but money at the top, yeah. And then, these days, I also think about the team that will be incorporated into my team once I take on that distributor. Like for a project that I'm working on, it's very precious to me. I'm going back into directing after how many years? This means a lot to me, so I wanna back the underdog. So I'm choosing a certain kind of distributor because I also know they're gonna work really, really hard. So there are so many factors, but yeah, but money is definitely at the top. Nobody says no.
Hi. Has technology changed independent film distribution in a substantial way?
The tech bros invaded our industry and totally changed the industry. So it's changed in that way. I mean, streaming upended the industry. As I said, it took a hit-driven business model and it flattened it and made it just buy everyone out up front, and there's no profit sharing on the back end. And so that has sort of made everything wonky and changed everything and made the corporations richer and the filmmakers poorer.
Yes, hence why we are in a crisis in the next.
You should read, I was interviewed for this article about Netflix in N+1, if you want to look it up. It's very interesting. It goes into the background of how the tech bros took over the film industry.
It has also improved certain parts of production, for sure. It's made certain parts cheaper. I can talk about the nonfiction documentary filmmaking side, AI transcription, AI translation, even in some editing softwares can pick out scenes for you, not that you want to trust that fully. But there are certain things, it does sadly cut out a bunch of jobs. That's the reality, but it's also when you're struggling with a budget, there are certain positions that now it's automated. So, that's a way to reduce the cost in your budget. So that's something, especially for nonfiction filmmakers, we think about a lot.
It's complicated. Other questions?
Hi, I'm Zayana, and I'm an actress and screenwriter. And my question for you guys were, say you have the producers and the funding attached, how do you go about finding a good director?
Finding a director? Yes. So I only speak for nonfiction. I really don't have any experience in scripted. So, but one, you look at past work. You look at aesthetics. Yeah, you look at heart. Will they gel with your producers? So it's that. Awards depends if you want to sell. Yeah. All of that, but.
And really, who responds to the material? When we were with Rosemead, we had a separate writer-director. We interviewed a whole bunch of directors, and the ones who basically gave us sort of the take that we found most compelling are the ones that we hired.
Yeah, I think it really depends on, I think it's important to take meetings. Even if you knew you had a director that you loved, think about, depending on who wrote it and also who's producing it, what movies do you think this is like? What's the style? What are you looking at? What are you interested in? Then you meet with the director and you hear her or his perspective and how they would approach this, then I think it's a really important thing. If you're looking at newer directors, not established directors, I would actually go to the list of their work and talk to their first AD, talk to different people who they work with, and ask how they were on set and what was it like, because set life is just as important. I personally think the environment that's created on set really bleeds into the work. And so to me, a director who has a great creative vision and is like efficient and, you know, is not as valuable if they create an awful set where they treat actors terribly.
Yes,
Just ask one question.
let's do 2 more questions. We'll
okay.
have you, oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm so
I just
close,
want
I
to
can
listen
just
to
say.
this one. Yeah.
So I wrote a screenplay where I need a lot of elderly actors who are Korean, who can speak Korean and English, and speak Korean perfectly, but English not so well. It's been very difficult finding, and we've approached a couple of casting directors who love the screenplay and say, I don't know how I can help you with this, because there aren't that many. So what I've had to do was to go a little bit younger, because I needed people who were 60s, mid-60s, and it's about this dutiful Korean grandma, newly divorced, who inadvertently becomes a weed dealer to other Korean seniors. And I made a short film that screened here 2 years ago called Halmoni's Pot, Grandma's Pot, about a dutiful Korean grandma who very reluctantly agrees to pick up weed for her grandson, but doesn't want to pay full price. And she basically gets the discount that she believes that she deserves. So it's done really well. Now I found the actress of my dreams. She lives in Korea. I need a really good visa, a lawyer to do the visa who will not charge me too much. Like pro bono would be really great. So if you know any
Good luck with
lawyers.
that. You need to budget $7,500 for all of that, for the lawyer and the visa fees.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. I'm sorry.
I just also want to add, for your situation, and I want to say this, because when people say, we went to the casting directors, even though I said, go meet some casting directors, know who they are, a lot of times casting directors will say, there's no category of this. There's not, because they don't know that demographic, because they don't have to call them in often. If you know Ken Park, you're looking for Asian actors and you find that they're hard. There's this guy who's a manager, his name is Ken Park. You know, or look for, I would say, look for the Asians in the industry that are Asian casting directors or agents or managers, because they know.
Yeah, I've talked to directors. They've given me their casting directors who cast their Asian films, but it's easy to cast the 40s, 50s, 30s, 20-year-olds. Very hard to do 60, 70, that age.
You know what I did? With Children of Invention, we had a couple of actors in their 60s and 70s. My director and I went to Chinatown and went to all the parks and literally talked to old people that we saw and asked if they wanted to head on to the show.
You're gonna have to tap into the community and
Yeah.
be open to non-trained actors.
Yeah. So that's the hard part for me, balance, because we don't have a huge budget. We're trying to make this film for under $500,000. And what you don't have is a lot of time. So you don't have time for for the characters to find themselves, for people who are not trained.
I think $7,500 for if you already found the actor that you want in Korea, $7,500 is not a lot to pay for the right lead actor. So
Yeah.
put it in your budget. Do it.
Yeah.
And we had one more question back there, right?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Every time I come to any of these seminars, I think I've heard it all. There's nothing new to learn. But then again, I'm always wrong. There's always something to learn from all of you. And I was just wondering, what do you say about the about micro budget filmmaking these days? Because I remember back in back in the day when we went to film school, we'd all get together, we had our own equipment. Someone would say, oh, I have, we'll just come up with like maybe 20, 30 grand, and then we'll go make a film. And then if we make 50 grand, we consider that like, hey, we make profit. What do you say about, those filmmakers now who have their own budget and they want to write their script around that budget? What happens to them then?
Well, I'm crazy about micro-budget filmmaking now. So, transparently, Mother May I Have a Kidney had a budget of $1 million. And that was, it's still very indie, but it was indie comfortable, I think. And so I'm currently in production now for a vertical series, which the budget is $5,000, which also means I had to come out of retirement and be an actress because I wrote a lot of stuff and I'm like, okay, who's gonna act this role and not get paid? That's me, So like, I don't wanna have to do that. I really like being a writer and a producer, but I'm going to act in this whole thing that I wrote. And I'm currently finishing a script on a horror feature that is taking all the people that I know, putting them in, and we're shooting it on iPhones and a gimbal. And so I going back to the technology, how has the technology changed? We can make things that look. I'm using Filmic, the app Filmic. It looks close. It's not. I'm not going to say it looks like you shot it on a red, but it looks good. And I'm going to try to make films, that's what Tarantino says, that's what Duplass says, make films for no budget, and you learn and you see. Now, I don't want to keep doing that, I want to make money. But I'm doing those things because I think it'll give me the experience, and you said you're a screenwriter, actress as well, did you say? Oh, screenwriter. So that's the thing is, what's so beautiful is you can make a short on your iPhone and start to at least at least it's a proof of concept, and you can make it for free. I don't love indie filmmaking. Some of my friends will make features for under $50K and pay everybody in pizza, and I don't love that. I don't, just as somebody who has a finance background, I'm like, we have to find money, especially when people are doing it. But if we're doing all of the elements myself, and I say all we, meaning my husband and I and some friends, or people who I coach some people I coach that are series regulars, they're making millions of dollars a year. So is it okay for me to ask for a favor? I feel like it is, and those are the people that I'll tap so that you start to do some indie things. But I think it's great to have a variety of things if you have the margin and the time to do indie stuff and to do, if you can, do bigger budget things.
If you have a script that can be shot for $50,000, do it. My first feature was $50,000, it went to South by Southwest. My second feature is $150,000, it went to Sundance. My third was $200,000, it went to Tribeca. So people are still doing it, More recently, Shiva Baby was $200,000. So people are still making these micro-budget films and getting them on the festival circuit. Just do it. Don't wait around to raise more money.
Oh, do you have anything to add to that before we wrap up?
It's very good advice.
Well, thank you to our amazing panelists. Thank you guys. It's been such an amazing conversation, so grounded, so generous. Thank you so much. And I hope you all, whether you're new to this or you're seasoned vets, that you have more clarity and more permission to make it. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the festival. We also have a short independent filmmaker event across the way.